Welcome back to Echo Ridge and another episode here on the mini base, where I'm currently being trolled by meteor showers. As you can see, it is cycle 363. If memory serves me correctly, I said take note that it's cycle 303, and that was when we started analyzing all the interstellar objects in the glorious star map. So far, we've done a pretty good job and have analyzed most everything. We only have 2 objects remaining, and there's a couple of reasons why it's taking so long. First, the game keeps throwing multiple meteor showers at me. There'd be times that we'd get a meteor shower, it would stop, and then just a few seconds later, another one would start. And whenever there's a meteor shower, we can't use the telescope. There was one instance as I was reaching the limits of insanity where we weren't able to use the telescope for 3 cycles. The second reason is because the further you get in the star map, the longer it takes to analyze the interstellar object. We were able to burn through a lot of these early and medium distant objects, but some of these later ones, they take a good bit of time. If I were to do this over again, I'd probably put the telescope somewhere over here. Now in this particular setup, we didn't have the room because we're collecting regolith, but this way we could have kept doing the telescoping and had a rocket getting ready to go. But with only 2 objects left, I figured it's time to start prepping this colony for flight. And there's a couple things we had to do. First, we dug all of this out, which at the time created a couple of problems because all of this rock and stuff is, over 1,000 degrees. We then swept it all up and dropped it off up here at this automatic dispenser, where the auto sweeper will put it in the conveyor loader and it'll eventually end up in our debris chilling system. On occasion, a duplicant would drop 1100 degree diamond and scaldings ensued. We're mostly recovered from that thanks to an addition I added to our cooling loop. We now have a 3rd line. Now as you can see, the coolant loop sort of splits off in 2. This is not the most efficient way to do it, but it is very versatile because I'm still able to get some cooling in the middle and I'm able to add some cooling down here at the bottom. Alternatively, what we could have done is something like this. Snip it off here and then loop it back and forth. I didn't think the added materials was necessarily worth it, and we also don't have a very big requirement for cooling. So that's the reason why I went with this method. During the time we've been waiting, I also cleaned up our petroleum production facility. You may have noticed in the end of last episode there was a lot of steam in here. Well, I figured out why. All this petroleum coming from our molten slicksters is coming in at over 125 degrees. And all of these lines were simple liquid pipes and were not insulated. So it was transferring all that heat, causing the oil to be much hotter, which then of course causes the water to be superheated and flash into steam. We fixed it by adding a bunch of insulated pipes to keep all the heat away from the oil well. Because this area got so hot, so did our natural gas area, so we're in the midst of cleaning it out now. Step 1 is to vacuum the whole thing out, which is not a bad thing to do before we get started on our rocketry anyways, because after that fact, it's going to be next to impossible to keep this place vacuumed. Some other prep work we've done is added a ladder to the other side, and the reason why is because we're going to need a method to be able to get up and over the rocket. And what I mean by that is you can see the rocket takes up almost the entire width of the shaft. Well, if we were to have a rocket climbing this area, we wouldn't have an ability to get from one side to the other. Luckily, everything we dug out here included a bunch of igneous rock, so we now have an extra 20 tons of raw mineral. I'm looking forward to digging all this out, but once again, it's adding to the heat in our disgusting dirty brick, which is then giving us more power, which I kind of like. But at any time, we could definitely scoop all this out. But right now, I don't really have a use for it. Speaking of our tiniest of dirtiest bricks, you may have noticed an excess of steam. Well, there's good reason for this. We're saving it up. You may remember from last episode that we have to start with the steam engine. That way we can travel to some of these interstellar objects, and once we do, we'll be able to research them and collect some databanks. So until we do that, we're sort of stuck with introductory rocketry. But afterwards, I think we're going to beeline into petroleum engines, which will take about 600 databanks. Not only will the petroleum engine give us more rocket height to work with, but we also have a nice petroleum refinement system that we'll be able to fuel the rocket with, instead of having to deal with some makeshift solutions with the steam engine. Yes, we could build in a sort of steam creation device down here, but it's really not worth it, considering we're creating all the steam we really need. This one dial has 180 kilos worth of steam. This one, 282. That's mostly because we're sitting at around 200 kilos worth of carbon dioxide pressure, so it is super compressing all that steam. But unless the molten slicksters figure out how to eat more carbon dioxide, that's just how it's gonna be. Kudwadi's finished the second to last interstellar object, and it's an oily asteroid. Now for the final destination. A quick disclaimer, there is going to be some spoiler type of material in this episode just due to the nature of where we are in this playthrough. We just finished another meteor shower, and I wanted to highlight that we added another space scanner just to save power, and since this space scanner didn't have any visibility, we temporarily disabled it just by disconnecting it from the power grid. The telescope in this position gives us a scan quality of 10%, which improves the scan network quality all the way up to 2%. So now we'll get notification between 5 seconds and 200 before meteors end up hitting, which is an improvement of 3 seconds. We're all about the gains here on Echo Ridge Gaming, and here we are being trolled again with another meteor shower. It's been so long that I've played the meteor game, and oxygen not included, that I had completely forgotten that you can put mesh tiles above the telescope and it still gives you line of sight. Well, not right now because we're blocked with bunker doors and regolith and what's turning out to be another forever meteor shower. But yes, mesh tiles allow visibility through them and a light. That's right, this meteor shower is still going. This might be the longest one yet. I think we're getting ready to round a full cycle. With the doors finally open, I can highlight what I mean about the mesh tiles in the telescope. As you can see, the light has no problem bypassing the mesh tiles. We're now starting to remove the right-hand ladder segment, but before I can continue, I need to get this natural gas generator back in and everything sealed up. And we're getting there. It's about 40 milligrams worth of steam down here. So just to accelerate this process, I think we're going to add another gas pump. I also figured out how so much steam got in here to begin with. When the floor ended up being here, when the regolith would fall from the top of the map, it would end up cooking some of the water in these tiles because it had regular water in it, and the regular water won't bypass into this bridge without us cutting it and then allowing everything to backfill. But once we get this whole thing vacuumed out and we stick our natural gas generator in, we'll no longer have those problems because it'll be fully insulated in and the oil here doesn't get above, say, 90 degrees. The process of vacuuming this out would be a little bit quicker if I could get this gas vent a little higher. The reason being is because some of the gases end up coming out of the vent and going back down into the atmosphere. But this has come up in a couple of comments. On the mini base, yes, you can see that the cannot build symbol stops here, but you actually cannot build any higher than this top piece of neutronium. Our wonderful natural gas generator room is finally completely vacuumed out, along with our wonderful rocket silo. And in even more good news, we finally revealed the most distant object. It is the temporal tear, which means it's time to start building some rockets. Before we do that though, I wanted to show you a couple more pieces of automation that I added to our secondary brick here. The first piece of automation is a buffer gate. What this buffer gate does, when petroleum fills all the way up and turns this liquid pipe element sensor green, the buffer gate keeps sending the green signal, which then gets flipped to red, telling this oil refinery not to turn back on. The reason why I implemented this is because when the petroleum would just be sitting in this one tile here, the liquid pipe element sensor would be like, hey, we're ready for more petroleum, in which case somebody would go to the oil refinery and turn it back on. Well, because there wasn't a lot of room, it would end up being sort of a half errand and not end up producing a lot of petroleum. In this case, with the buffer gate set at 60 seconds, it allows some time for the petroleum generators to use a little bit of this petroleum before we go ahead and make more. The next was a hydro sensor connected to this oil well. The oil was starting to get pretty high, which wouldn't be a big problem except it compresses all this natural gas, and if there's too much natural gas in the room, the oil refinery will not work. Additionally, given a long enough time, based on our consumption, this oil well would fill the entire area. So we put a simple little hydro sensor in here that just turns the oil well off when the oil level gets to this height. The last piece is an Atmos sensor. This Atmos sensor is actually detecting that natural gas pressure, and if it ever gets above 4,000, regardless if the grid needs power or not, it'll tell the natural gas generator to turn on and start using some of that natural gas. Since we've put in a couple of those systems, this has worked so much better. But now it's time for the good stuff. Step 1, let's start removing these ladders. Unfortunately, it's going to take a little while because we got to do one by one. Hopefully, we can get into that system where when they deconstruct one, they'll go ahead and deconstruct the next one because they're right there. Just like Ed is doing. Great job, Ed. Except they forgot to grab the ladder and then fell to the bottom. Which reminds me, could you imagine if there was fall damage in the game? Makes me wonder why they didn't add that. We're also getting rid of all these extra gas pumps. And then finally, we're going to have to get rid of our telescope and our nice 10% space scanner. Now, unfortunately, when you do deconstruct the telescope, all of this oxygen is going to be released. But right now, it doesn't matter. We already have this closed up, and it's a necessary evil. And then lastly, we need to get rid of these mesh tiles, because while they do allow light to pass through, they're definitely not going to allow a rocket to pass through. And before I forget, let's go ahead and power this space scanner back on, just in case we need to shut these doors. With the rocket silo complete, I wanted to add a couple of quick notes. You may have noticed that we moved the heavy want joint plates that were connected to this tank, and they were connected to the natural gas generator. The reason why is because when the rocket takes off and emits all of that heat, we don't want it to transfer into either of these areas. Unfortunately, this means we had to get a little bit creative and go through our double liquid locks. It is definitely not ideal, and unless you're playing on something like a mini base, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Generally speaking, launching rockets indoors is not a good thing. When you go to put down your steam engine, it's expensive. 2 tons worth of steel. A little bit different than spaced out, huh? Before it's even finished being built, we can throw down a research module at 200 kilos, again worth of steel, and then the command capsule. That also is 200 kilos worth of steel. And there she is, our beautiful vanilla rocket. Well, steam rocket, but you get my point. We have it connected to some insulated gas pipes, and those gas pipes, as previously discussed, are connected to a gas pump that is going to grab all of this beautiful steam. Now, just to make sure that we only grab steam, we have a gas filter on it that sends any carbon dioxide that it finds right up to this carbon skimmer. Now, I know that carbon dioxide is going to be very hot at about 125 degrees. We don't care. The carbon skimmer is going to eat it quick enough to where it shouldn't be a big deal. Plus, carbon dioxide has very low thermal properties anyways. Finally, we have a signal switch connected to the gas pump. And the reason why is because it only needs 900 kilos worth of steam. After that, you're just wasting power, and chances are you're going to create a mess. Because remember, the longer the steam sits in these pipes, the greater the chance that it's going to flash back into water, break the pipes, etc., etc. We don't care too much because, again, we're not going to be using the steam engine for long. Now, you might have been wondering, what are we going to do with all the regolith materials whenever one of the 5 million meteor showers goes by? Well, nothing. When the bunker doors open, it all falls down here. We just dig it out, and everything will go back to working as normal. Not surprisingly, the steam engine's not going to overheat. You can see it's still sitting at 45 degrees, despite it being wrapped in 300-degree regolith. It's made out of a different steel. You don't have to worry about it. It's super secret steel. Oh, that scalding message? Don't worry about it. Every once in a while, the dupes grab some very hot material and start transferring it around the base, in which case, Angry Forest then gets second-degree burns. The last thing we have to worry about is how do we get into the command capsule? Well, in vanilla, we use something called gantries. While they're available in DLC, I don't think I've ever used them. The point of a gantry is it's allowed to go over a rocket. Well, it's not allowed to go over ladders, that's why it's doing that. But you can see here, the gantry can actually be placed over rocket modules. But like everything else in Minibase, it's gonna get tricky. We just so happen to have a little bit of space here, so I believe we're just gonna fill all this in and give ourselves a little bit more space. Now, there's some other considerations you have to make, because if we launch this rocket with this gantry out, it'll break the gantry, in which the duplicates will either come repair it, wasting more steel, or you'll have to build a new one. The simple way to get around this is to connect it with a signal switch. When we're ready to launch the rocket after the pilot is loaded, we can just send it a red signal, and the gantry closes. Hilariously, it's going to require 1200 watts of power. Now, alternatively, you can do some slick stuff with the automation. For instance, you could have your rocket automatically firing, and right before it does, you send the signal to retract all the gantries. I mean, you could do all that, but again, this is a temporary rocket with a temporary mission. Ooh, it looks like you can rename the rocket in vanilla, too! Ladies and gentlemen, the very creative Ed's Rocket. Now, before you can actually select where you want to go with your rocket, you're going to need to go to your star map. But you'll notice our star map is no longer clickable. And the reason why is because we deconstructed our telescope. Once you create it, your star map button comes back. You don't even need to put gas to it. It doesn't need line of sight. Maybe it's the computer. Maybe the computer that did all the research has all the astronomical data, and that's all they're using it for. But once you're able to get back into the star map, you can then select a planetoid and then launch a mission. Well, once you have enough steam to be able to hit the range. Right now, with the amount of steam that we have loaded up, we'd only be able to go 5,700 kilometers. This asteroid is 10,000 kilometers away, so we have a little bit more fuel to go. Oh, by the way, the steel that the gantry's made out of is the non-special steel. So your gantries will take in more temperature, although they have an overheat temperature of 2200 degrees, so it's not a big deal. I know what it is. This is insulated steel. We are nearing the 900 kilos that we need to fill this steam engine up, which means we can turn off the signal switch. All said and done, we ended up with 862 kilos. We could top it off, but it doesn't matter. All we have to do is assign Ed to the rocket. Apparently, we caught Ed in the middle of a bathroom break, so they'll be with us after they eat and take a nice nap. Here comes Ed now. Now, you may notice that this place is already filled with a little bit of steam, and that was because of the inevitable. We had one pipe break in which a little bit of steam got out. Not a big deal. But now that Ed's loaded, we can see the check mark by astronaut. When we go back to the star map, the rocket status has changed a little bit, and it's got the launch checklist, the maximum range, and some additional details like the mass, storage, fuel, and the total oxidizer. You can even have some passengers by using the sightseeing module. That's right. You just cram a dupe in there, and that's where they sit during the entire rocket flight. Of course, Ed doesn't have much better either, because now that we've played Spaced Out, it kind of raises the question, what is Ed eating in the command capsule? Where are they going to the bathroom? Are they sleeping? I swear it feels like I've been waiting for meteor showers all day. Finally! Now we can get back to the business at hand. Well, as soon as we get done cleaning up the regolith, that's going to fall all over Ed's rocket. Apparently, I'd also forgotten to add the extra atmosuit. I don't know what we're going to be doing with the extra atmosuit. Maybe once Ed pees in the first one enough, they switch to the clean atmosuit. I don't know. I kid you not. I got the atmosuit, and apparently it was time for another meteor shower. Look at that. It was only 3/4 of a cycle this time. Now, I think we're finally ready. We select our carbon asteroid, and then we can click Launch Mission. Take note of the way the weight system works in vanilla. Our total thrust that we have from the amount of steam we have loaded up is 1724. It then subtracts the amount of weight you have on the rocket, and it gives you your total range. And yes, of course, I left the gantry extended. It was so I could show you what it looked like. Now there's a lot of steam in here, and it's sitting at around 250 degrees. There's nothing to say that you can't recapture all this steam for subsequent missions. But I don't know if the juice would be worth the squeeze. Each one of these tiles only has about 3 kilos in it. The next thing we have to do is reconfigure our space scanner. We don't want it to be detecting meteor showers anymore. We want it to detect Ed's rocket. Except when Ed's rocket is coming, we want it to make sure the doors stay open. All we have to do for this is now deconstruct the nut gate, and now our bunker doors are going to stay closed until the scanner network detects Ed's rocket, the bunker doors open, and then Ed's rocket lands. What happens if there's a meteor shower going on at the same time? Well, nothing. The bunker doors open and a bunch of meteors fly in, and destruction reigns. Welcome to Oxygen Not Included. Now, unfortunately, unlike in Spaced Out, it's a little anticlimactic in the star map when you have rockets out and about. You can see here that it has a time remaining of how long it's going to take for the rocket to get there, and that's about it. What's Ed eating on the way? Oh, he stuffed some gristleberry in his pockets before he left. While Ed's trying to figure out which pockets he packed that gristleberry in, we went ahead and upgraded the power grid. It wasn't much. We just changed all the 2-strand wire over to conductive wire, and where we once had a standard power transformer, we just replaced it with a large. Not a big update, but I try to keep you guys in the loop. Now, I'm a little concerned. Ed is already on his way back. You can see we only have 0.1 cycles remaining. I don't see any of the research checked off. It looks like they just flew there and then flew back. As the plan, the space scanner is detecting Ed's rocket, and the bunker doors have opened. Ed's got some explaining to do. In fact, I'm not going to extend the gantry out to let him out of the rocket until he tells me where the databanks are. Ed, we need the databanks. Oh, there they are. They fell right out of the rocket. It was just a bit of miscommunication. We can go ahead and let Ed out. They've been holding their bladder for about 5 cycles. Apparently the star map just hadn't updated. You can see that we have a check mark now in front of Study Upper Atmosphere. So we're going to go ahead and select Solid Fuel Combustion, In fact, we're just going to go ahead and select hydrocarbon combustion because we're not stopping until we hit petroleum engines. And now all that's left is to rinse and repeat. We're going to load the rocket full of steam again, send Ed up to the exact same asteroid another 4 times, because you can see there's only 4 more research missions that they can go on, each rewarding you more data banks. And then if you send the research module back there, you're not going to get anything in return. And then we're going to start flying to this carbon asteroid. Needless to say, this isn't everybody's favorite part of old school Oxygen Not Included. And hence the reason why everybody was so excited when Spaced Out came out. The star map meant a little bit more. Maybe it's just me though. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Yeah, this method is a little bit simpler than it is in Spaced Out, but it is very repetitive. But once we do get hydrocarbon combustion, we'll be able to go back and grab the cargo bay, and then we'll be able to start mining from these asteroids. Not that we need any of their goodies, well, at least not until we see what these question marks are holding. I suspect when I go ahead and edit this video that it's going to be on the shorter side, but considering it's cycle 392, that means I've been recording for almost 90 cycles. Needless to say, I'm ready to call it a day. I hope you had a great time and are still enjoying this series. Until next time, I'll talk to you soon.